Well, Bill, I'd like to thank you so much for the opportunity to come and interview you today. Today is the 29th of November 2021 and we're at 15 Murphy's Road in Blenheim interviewing Mr. William Heenan about his life and career as a crane driver on the Greymouth Wharves.
Right.
Right, so Bill, I thought we might start with just a little background on you generally, like where were you born, when and where were you born?
Well, I was actually born in Greymouth in 1934. My biological father and my mother were divorced when I was, well, I don't know how old I was, but Dave Heenan married my mother and changed my name to Heenan and adopted me, and we moved to Hokitika where he had a fish and chip shop in Revel Street.
Okay, what year did you move to Hokitika?
Ooh, well, I was born in 34 and I guess I was about 4 years old, so 38, but that's guessing.
Okay, and you went to school in Hokitika?
Yes, I did.
Yep.
I lived there for 10 years. When I was 15, I joined the Royal New Zealand Navy.
And what did you do in the Navy?
My career stage was a diver. I started diving in 1954, I think it was, and I was still a diver, running the operational diving team when I left the Navy in 1976.
So that obviously that career took you to many places. Bill.
Well, yes, I was lucky because in my early days, I joined the Navy in '49. I went to the Bologna. I was over in England for the Queen's coronation, and on the way back, the Argostoli earthquakes happened, which unfortunately levelled the Cephalonia, and we stopped there living in tents and worked and helped them. Then come back to New Zealand, and let's face it, before I was 21, I'd probably been twice around New Zealand, twice around Australia, and of course in 51, 52 I spent 14 months in Korea, which meant something different again, eating World War II food.
From the research that we've done, we see that you applied for a job on the Greymouth Cranes, on the Greymouth Wharf in 1958. So
True.
when did you leave the Navy?
That's the date I was trying to work out on. I think it was around about 1958. My wife and I both come from the coast, and at that stage we had Robin, our daughter, and Anne really wanted to come back down the coast. So I went down the coast, and I applied for a job as a diver with the Greymouth Harbour Board, and they said, well, quite obviously there was not enough diving work to keep me fully employed there, but would I be willing to train up as a crane operator? And the training was, there's the crane, get in there, start driving. Quite simple, really.
Okay. Well, would you like to just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, up until this stage, the cranes were the old steam cranes operated by the Waterside Workers Union. And prior to me going down there, they brought the American Sheldons, which were electric, of course, and totally different. Off the top of my head, I think they were rated at about 18.
Tons,
they were 12 ton.
Yeah.
Okay. And the hoppers of coal we were lifting were 8 ton each, and the wood and timber that we were loading into various ships, well, depending on the size of the bundle. But they were a very, if you like, an easy crane to operate. They were good, they were a very efficient crane, but I could be a little bit facetious, and they weren't designed for West Coast weather. They had no seats in them. The big windows at the front had to be opened, and you stood at the controls all day long. And your hand was on these controls, which were big, solid brass knobs. And you know what coal does to brass. nobody, if we had an early morning start, ever wanted to work on hole number 2, because it meant you were facing up the valley and the grey barber comes straight in your windows. And that was not very pleasant in the winter time.
Must have been freezing.
It was freezing. You couldn't wear gloves. You had to have control, touch control. And as I say, they're big brass knobs, because they were electric, and you just swung them around various directions. No, that wasn't the best. I do believe I had the job of lifting the heaviest load ever down there in Greymouth, where the railway brought in a Matiza. Do you know what a Matiza is?
No.
Okay, it's like a big engine, if you like, but it's got rams that go in the side like this and push all the soil and gravel underneath the what do you call it? Cross pieces on the railway, sleepers. And I couldn't tell you the exact weight, but it came in on a truck underneath the crane, and I had to lift it off and put it on the rails. And when I started to lift it, the back wheels of the crane come off the rails. Oh. Whoops, back to go again. So we got it right in as absolutely as close, luffed up as far as we could. And it was a bit of a hair-raising experience, but we got it.
So you said that you were in at the deep end, as it were, on the cranes as a crane driver. There wasn't any formal training. How did you learn to drive the cranes? Did you have somebody there with you, sort of teaching you the ropes, or?
Yeah, when I started, Colin Liggins was there. Like there was Colin Liggins, Kenny Dow, Dudley Palmer, myself. Colin was, if you call it, like a lead crane operator, and he gave me a rush round on the controls. That one's up and down, that one's sideways.
Right, and then you were there on your own.
We were, yeah. But as I say, they were a very simple crane, or easy. They were an efficient crane to operate. There's never a trouble in that respect with them.
I just got to this question here. It seems you would have been one of the first drivers employed by the Greymouth Harbour Board after they took over the cranes from New Zealand Rail, who had operated and maintained them up until 1958. We've seen papers that suggest the issue of control of the wharf cranes had been a hot one between New Zealand Rail and the Grey Harbour Board. Were you aware of any animosity through your daily workings of the two organisations?
Not really. I think that was more or less ironed out before I took over. They had no option. They said, this is it. We are now, the cranes are now operated by the Harbour Board, whereas the Waterside Workers Union had nothing to do with it. We worked with them on the gangs on the wharf, obviously, but they didn't drive the cranes. Okay. And there was no real animosity as such, no.
Okay. Oh, that's good.
Well, nothing that I knew of, anyway.
I think, as I say, from about 1953, there was a bit of an issue because the Harbour Board was, because they obviously controlled all the movements on the wharf.
Yep.
But for a while, it was actually New Zealand Rail and the Watersiders were running the cranes, and so that it made it a little difficult, and so they'd always been keen that it move into Harbour Board control, which is what happened.
Yeah, but of course the area you're talking about is prior to me ever arriving there.
But it obviously, as you say, it had been ironed out by the time you got there. Yeah. And then there's a guy, an ex-driver called Ian Houseman, just going back to what you were saying. He was interviewed in the Grey Star, and what he said was that the cranes were relatively easy to drive, even though the size was quite daunting. They were big machines and quite slow to operate. The biggest issue being to take the swing out of the hook and be able to judge your right height. Does that sound to you like what you experienced as well?
Oh, that's with every crane.
Yeah.
If the worst thing you can do with a crane is pick it up and suddenly turn, because your load is behind you, and when you stop, the load keeps going. And that's when a really inexperienced crane operator can get into serious problems, especially if the load's heavy. Well, hopefully you'll never ever see a crane driver out of control, panicking, and gets it swinging. He tries to catch the load up, and the worst thing you can possibly do, it just accelerates the lateral swing of it. If you pick a load up, you can move it around quite fast and stop. And when your crane comes, when the load follows you around, you just move with it and stop it, and bring it back and stop it, so that if you like, your load is not swinging out of control. Because if you've got workers down below, like the waterside workers, especially with these 8-ton hoppers of coal, you've only got a little square like that to put them back into. You must be accurate, otherwise you're knocking the wharfies around a bit. They don't like that.
I see you've got a list of names there. That's the drivers who were there at the time you were there, is that?
Yeah, the one you mentioned I'd never heard of, in actual fact.
Later, yeah.
Yep. The ones working with me were, as I say, Colin Liggins, Dudley Palmer, Johnny Cole and Kenny Dow. I know for a fact that Dudley Palmer and Johnny Cole have passed on. Kenny Dow completely lost track of. I haven't got the faintest idea where he is.
So you have to talk a little bit. You described a treacherous situation where the crane came off the rail. Are there any other situations that were, dicey? Any other dicey situations you can remember?
Not really. On loading the various ships, carvatory, etc., on the Grey Wharf, excuse me, we never ever had what you'd call a really dangerous load or overload. That Batista was an exception.
Right. And
let's face it, all I had to do was lift it, take the train out and put it back on the rails, sort of thing. And we got past that. No, we never had a situation that really worried us. Believe it or not, we maintained the cranes by greasing them, of course, and the pulleys right up at the end of the crane itself. We were paid, would you believe, 1 and 6pence every time you went up to grease those cranes. Right at the end of the boom, you had to climb right up the top of it. There was well, you call it a walkway, if you like, and some of the guys didn't like doing it, so it never ever worried me. I used to put the crane out over the river, so that if I fell in the river and not on the wharf, and you just scoot up there and do the greasing and come back and then go and do Dudley's and somebody else's. But I'd get 1 and 6pence for each one. And believe it or not, 1 and 6pence in those days was quite handy.
How often did you have to do that?
I only do them about once a week, those top ones.
Okay.
There was daily greasing except for those top ones.
We've seen that when the Harbour Board took over the cranes, they made quite a big thing of the fact that the drivers would be responsible for arranging the maintenance of their own cranes, which wasn't how it used to work when New Zealand Rail was there. So you've just mentioned that obviously the greasing of the pulley was part of that. What else was involved in the maintenance of the cranes?
Well, obviously chipping and painting any rust, that type of thing, to keep them up to scratch. But we never had individual cranes.
Right.
I mean, one day you might be in one, and one day next one after that the other one. But we did, if you like, amongst ourselves keep a record. We knew which cranes were greased and which weren't, sort of thing. You had to, otherwise if you were to miss out on something and one of the bogies wasn't greased for a month, you'd end up with problems.
And were all the cranes, were they the same to work in, or were there some cranes that were better than others?
They were completely identical.
Okay.
Apart from the New Zealand built one, which was there first, wasn't it? There was 3 Sheldon.
Well, yeah. Sorry.
And the big one as well. Yeah. Did you walked across all 4 of them?
Oh yeah, the crane, whichever crane was required.
Yeah.
We had, I think, offhand the Carvatieri was the biggest coal boat we used to get. If I remember off the top of my head, she took 3,100 tonne, and the others were all smaller. And of course, prior to that, we did quite a bit of general cargo work as well, just offloading bags of sugar and coffee and tea and biscuits, if you like.
How did the shift arrangements work, Bill?
The
shift. What was your how long did you work for? Did you do an 8-hour day? Was there much overtime?
Yeah, we were a standard 8-hour day from 8 in the morning. We had an hour for lunch sort of thing. But with Greymouth being a river and tidal, there was a lot of overtime work done. We were, if required, we simply worked through till the boat was finished.
Right.
And hopefully we'd work and get it finished in time to catch that tide and go.
Did you socialise together a lot, the drivers? Was it? I mean, obviously the town was fairly busy.
Yeah, we were friends, put it that way, we were good friends.
Yeah. And were the wharfies pubs and pubs for the rest, or no?
The wharfies knew the situation, they come to accept it. It's like I was working on the wharf during the wharf strike, and the miners, we were working in the mines. I mean, in those days it was 6 o'clock closing, and at about 6 o'clock we battened down the hatches because everybody would come out of the pubs and throw all their empty beer bottles down on the steel decks. But given time, they all come to accept what was happening. We had one English chap on board who was a conscientious objector. He wouldn't do it. And he was Jankus, crouching with a rifle above his head, leapfrogging up and down the wharf. Of course, all the locals, what on earth is he doing that for? That's because he's being punished, because he wouldn't work in the mines. That's what happens to us if we don't work. And they come to accept this. In actual fact, there's 1, 2, 3 people, married girls, from Westport. After it was all over, sort of thing, they become attached and at a later date married. Well, the locals really did come to accept us in that respect, but I'm getting away from Greymouth, if you like.
Yeah. So was there a good social life at that time?
Social life?
Yeah. Like associated with work. Did you? Was there a bit of fun to be had down in Mawhera Key?
Well, we'd always, or sometimes have a beer together sort of thing, but we were all young, married with young children. We didn't really socialise like we do here today and have our friends here for drinks and dinners and things like that. It was a different style of entertaining, if you like, and of course it was 6 o'clock closing.
Right, okay, so that took care of that.
Were you the drivers, were you part of a union or not?
Yeah, we belong to the Harbour Board.
Right. And I've read somewhere that the drivers all had a qualification, or they all had to have a certain qualification. Is that true, or is that just
as a crane operator?
At the Harbour Board, yeah.
I've never had a qualified. I drove a crane on the Greymouth Wharf for those years, and then for the first 3-4 years of my work in the oil field, I drove a crane on oil rigs, where you have the rig moving up and down possibly 5 or 10 feet, and the boat down below anything 20, 30 feet. I am not qualified to drive a crane in New Zealand.
What was the strangest cargo you ever had to lift?
The strangest? That's a good question. I don't really think. Let's face it, it was either coal or water general cargo. We never had animals or anything like that to lift. Nothing at all, really.
Were the barges starting to appear by the time while you were working there?
Barges, no.
Because that came later on. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
What was the morale like amongst the workers?
Oh, I'd have to say pretty good, really. we never had any major problems or quarrels or sometimes there might be a little bit of resentment if, say, two operators were required on a Sunday, and of course they get the full day. On a Sunday we're paid double pay. It actually a minimum of 4 hours double pay, and of course everybody wanted it. And if there was only 2 drivers required, the head crane operator or the lead, which in my time there was Colin Liggins, he if you like shared it out as fairly as he possibly could, sort of thing. And sometimes some guy couldn't do it. Sometimes I say, hey, you know, you've had 2 guys, I've only had 1. But it was a minor thing, really.
Yeah.
The crane operators as a whole, all of those guys were pretty good guys. They really were. I like to call them friends. Well, I did call them friends in those days.
Oh, that's good.
We're looking at the stats for the cargo, and the biggest years for coal at Greymouth Harbour was about 1916. Around that time, they were doing more than double the amount that was going through when you were there. So the coal had declined, and the wood that had always, that in the earlier years, that was a lot bigger as well before they couldn't export the native wood anymore. So the amount of throughput at the port was declining, but it was still a busy place, was it?
Oh, relatively busy.
Yeah.
Well, I was there, yes, it was. We've seldom had a long period with no ships in.
Right. Okay. So there was a constant turnover.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And most of those were the colliers, were they, or there were?
Oh, mainly colliers.
Yeah.
And in the end, all colliers, the general shipping, general cargo, just seemed to come to a halt, and it was nothing but coal.
I suppose that started to come more on the rail then, did it? Through the general cargo, I mean.
Probably, yeah. We did, of course, offload, onload, I should say, quite a bit of timber originally, and the wharfies had a rate, because all of the timber that originally would come on coal or on the railway lines was manhandled, plank by plank, down into the hull, and then they got the big strapped-in loads that come on the long wagons, I forget what they were called, and we'd lift one whole wagon up like that and put it down, and the wharfies still got the same rate that they were getting if they were handling it plank by plank. That was a big contention with them, not with us. They weren't paid by the harbour board, but that was unions, of course, as you know, on the west coast were pretty strong.
If we could just go back to the mechanics of doing the colliers. Now, as I understand it, you get a rake of wagons put in front of you underneath the cranes, and you would lift the entire hopper off, or was it the whole wagon or the hopper off the wagon?
They lift the hopper out of the wagon.
Right.
And the hopper had a dropping doors on the bottom,
yeah,
and with a lock-in handle, and the wharfies had big, long poles, if you like, and they just bash the clip open and 8 ton would disappear, and then pick it up. We'd bring it back, they would close the doors, and then we'd put it down on the bogie.
And at that time, of course, there was the marshalling yards there, so there were a few rails across. How far across could the cranes reach? Over how many tracks were you picking up from?
There was the tracks, because of course the cranes ran on tracks.
Yeah.
They were the one of the wharf that'd be one. From my memory, I think only about 2.
Right.
Be the most.
And you just work down the trains of wagons and pick them up one at a time and drop them in the hole?
They worked that, and they shunted them underneath. The only wagons we picked up were from underneath us.
Right.
Usually.
Yeah.
I would say usually. Sometimes because of some particular reason you might have had to go out a bit to another line, But very seldom. Usually they just keep bringing them up one at a time, and we loaded up, load, because by the time we lifted and put it over there, they had time to move the shunt up one more load sort of thing.
And who ran that process, or you all understood how it worked?
Well, the railway,
yeah,
of course, brought the trains in.
yeah,
The waterside workers hooked the crane into it, and the crane operators who were the harbour board actually did the lifting.
right. But in terms of the actual process, because it's all the same guys, they knew how to do it, and there didn't need to be anybody particularly in charge. The train would just arrive, it'd be shunted, you would lift it, put it back, and then and it would move on.
We, as crane operators, were basically under control of the waterside workers.
Right.
They weren't our bosses, but they controlled everything we did because we couldn't do anything if they went down there to hook it up or unhook it.
That's the Q bolts, is it?
The actual crane had a four-legged, or a square, if you like, and there was 4 chain legs with hooks on, and they were designed specifically to fit into those loops on the side of the wagons. And of course, all we could do was put it down in a position, and the waterside workers hooked it in and give us a word to go up. And that's where you're being extremely careful, because you never lifted unless you had the word to lift, because somebody's fingers might be in there.
And did the wind have much of an impact? Could the wind stop work?
No.
No.
No, it was never blowing that hard that we had to stop for work. No, never. Or not while I was there anyway. Believe it or not, sometimes it was difficult to load because of the barber, because it was just that thick and woo, you don't want to be lifting 8 ton out over there when you can't see anybody. And the barber, people don't realise that never lived in Greymouth, just how bad the barber can be. But you would know about it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, indeed, yes. So that was a big factor, a safety factor, the barber. So that's a winter.
But by the same token, a very rare one.
Okay.
It was very, very rarely did it stop us.
Okay, so the colliers, as I understand, were anything from 600 to 3,000 tonnes, roughly. And how long would it take you to turn around a ship if things were working well?
Good question. I don't really know. I can't remember just how long that might take. But you're looking at 3,000. I think it was Kaitangata was 3,100 tonne, the biggest one of the lot. And it would probably, believe me, I'm guessing here now, but around about 3, 4, maybe even 5 hours.
To do the whole lot?
Yep.
Right, okay. And these colliers were mainly going to the North Island, is that right? That was most of the coal?
Most of it. Just exactly where they took it, I don't really know.
Right, okay.
And of course we went through the period where we had the Japanese coming in and picking up our coal, and that was going straight to Japan.
Were they bigger ships or about the same size?
No, about the same size.
Because there's a limitation to the ships that could go into the Grey Harbour.
The Greymouth Harbour regulated the size of the ships.
Yeah.
Especially with big ones. If we loaded a ship to capacity and then they slipped her and let it go, we all used to watch as you go out, and you could always tell when it touched the bar, boing, and see the mast go. And that was, they'd invariably hit the bar. So that was a limiting factor.
Yeah, yes. Was it physically demanding work, the crane work? Well, you had it by the end of the day?
Not really.
No.
You got to realise we're still in our 30s, eh?
Yes.
I would imagine 8 hours on a crane standing on my feet today I would find tiring. But in those days you could handle it. And we always, of course, had breaks. I was trying to remember. I think it's a maximum of 2 hours. You had to, according to the rules, union rules, you had to physically climb down out of that crane, and you'd have a standby driver all the time. He'd take over. You had to take 20, and just you get out, walk around, have a smoke, do what you want to do, sort of thing. But you had to physically get out of the crane.
How often?
I think it was 2 hours, 4 hours. It could have been 4. Sorry, the old brain
That's
cells
all
not
right.
really working, but
But it was fairly regular, so it was fairly...
it was. It's like truck drivers,
Yeah.
limited
Yeah, 3 or
in their
4
mileage.
times a day. Mm.
And was that rule honoured?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
we made certain it was, because it was us.
And that you were talking about the fact that you were loading on logs. What do you remember? What sort of timber was that, and where was that heading to?
Where the timber was going, I really couldn't tell you, but most of our stuff went to Wellington, I believe. But where it went from there, God only knows.
What was the... How much coal, how much timber? What was the biggest...
Oh, coal.
Coal was the biggest.
Coal, definitely.
Yeah.
I think
We-
there were times when there was a lot of timber, but from what I can gather, it
Well,
wasn't that.
Even in the period I was there, the timber was going downhill,
Yeah.
becoming less and less.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us, Bill?
About life down there in the cranes, not really.
How long were you there for?
Good question. I believe from about 1958, I know I left in 62 to go back into the Navy, and I believe it was 58 when I come down.
Okay.
Because
so
I drove that period. I joined the Navy, did my initial time, and we come back down there, but it really wasn't working out. And my wife said to me one day, "You'd really like to go back." I was reading a piece out of the paper about what some Navy ship had done, and she said, "You'd really like to go back, wouldn't you?" And I said, "Yeah, it'd be all right." She said, "Right, let's go." I said, "You're joking." She said, "No, you're not happy here, but you want back?" Okay, so I went back, and I did a total of 27 years.
So when you went back into the Navy, where did it go?
To rejoin the Navy, obviously Philomel in Auckland. Philomel is the only naval base in New Zealand.
Right.
But from there, well, of course, I got promoted, I did various odd things, and I got right into the diving side of things. And I ended up as a Chief Petty Officer running the operational diving team. And then my last years, when the younger guys were coming through diving, I was coxswain and buffer on the Oceanographical Research boat, Tui. And I spent 3 years running a fisheries patrol launch around New Zealand. So all sorts of different things. But I've been extremely lucky because I was being paid to do exactly what I love doing, diving. That was it. A lot of people pay all sorts of things and have very little chance to dive. I had every day.
Wow.
It was good.
Just going back to the Cow and Sheldon cranes, there were 3 of them, and there was this other William Cable crane as well. So they were the 4 electric cranes on the wharf.
The cable crane was really slowly phased out.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to drive the cable crane. We
That's
all
what I was going to
electric.
ask you. You obviously you worked across all of them. You've said, did they
Yeah,
all
but
have different personalities? Or?
no, the Sheldons were all basically the same. They were good. As I say, they were a very comfortable, easy crane to drive. They were good. If I can digress a little bit,
Sure.
when I was working up in Indonesia, we did an underwater survey of the crane barges that this crowd up there used, and they have a crane, a floating crane, specifically designed for building oil rigs, if you like. That crane could lift 2,000 tonne at a time, and it could lift it high, and it could turn 360 degrees. I would have given my left arm to get in the controls of that one sometime, but never ever could, of course. But it had a 25-ton crane that was used to lift up the sligs to put on the big hook.
Just the slings.
Yeah, well, no man could lift it, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Oh, that was one very impressive barge.
Did you? I've read somewhere that if there were big loads, that two of the cranes would work in unison, and then that way they could lift up to 20 ton.
Yeah, we did.
Did that happen?
Yeah, we did do that.
Yeah. That would require a bit of coordination, I think.
Yeah, but the thing is, as I say, the crane operators were French. We trusted each other. We knew each other, and had all the right signals. But that was something. Even though we can do it like that, we didn't like to do it, because you're wide open for mistakes in a situation like that. I mean, one little thing can go wrong and people can get hurt.
So
it was a point where we were very, very safety conscious on a crane. I actually, well, I won't say I had to, but one of the wharfies, the whole time I worked there, he ended up in hospital because the crane, the hopper got him and knocked him off his feet, if you like. He didn't break anything, but he was, well, I don't know, you're 40, 50 years old sort of thing, and ended up in the Greymouth Hospital. So I wasn't very happy about that, and that's the only time it ever happened. And he was actually out of my sight, which is unusual, but it's because of the way we were working. And
well, that's a
pretty good record, isn't it?
yes, that's a pretty impressive record. One accident during that time,
yeah.
and it wasn't.
Well, the whole time I was there,
fatal.
nobody ever broke a bone or was certainly no deaths, not even a broken bone.
So a very safety conscious culture on.
Oh yes, it was. I mean, let's face it, you're up there, you're looking down, and you've got these wharfies, and you know them all by first name, and you know how old they are, some of them are, sort of thing, and it does make you be very careful. Well, let's just face it, the last thing you ever want to do is kill anybody. Couldn't handle that.
So, Bill, the communications in the cabs of the crane, who were you talking to? Or was it all done by hand signals or
Yelling out.
Or yelling out?
Yep.
It was all done by
We
yelling.
were just simply talking to, but you could hear what they were saying and what they were calling out as such. And as you say, there was always hand signals. I mean, that one goes up, everything comes to a grinding halt. You stop what you're doing, it doesn't matter what it's for, and you don't query it or question it, you stop. You know, because they can see something that maybe you can't see. Especially when we're loading timber, because the holes are open and you're putting that all the way down, and sometimes they're out of sight, and you've got a tic-tac man up top saying that way, down, up, whatever, and you rely entirely on him. And because you could have 10 people, 5 people working underneath you down there.
Yeah, well, you'd have, and then the general cargo as well, you have people in the holds, whereas with the colliers, you didn't, you were just emptying coal right in there.
Collier was always done from the top.
Yeah.
They stood up on top of the hatch and banged it and it just dropped. But timber, of course, was different. It had to be manhandled into position and squared away.
So communication was really key, and you really had to trust the people you were working with.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's always that certain amount of trust. But let's face it, they too knew their job. They knew they were the ones that were going to get hurt if they didn't do it right. So they'd give us the right signals.
And while you drivers would sort of call in the maintenance that was necessary and do a number of the checks yourself, the actual heavy engineering was done at the Harbour Board Works, was it, I presume? If any was required on the cranes. Who would do that any welding or stuff like that? Would they?
Oh, that'd be partitioned off. We had no welders as such. Well, we did have one worked on the dredge, so any minor welding here would do, but no.
You got people in to do that sort of stuff when it was necessary.
Well, there was nothing ever really major to be done.
Great. They're very reliable pieces of machinery.
Well, as I say, they were good cranes, no doubt about that.
Yes, we feel lucky to have them. We feel very lucky that we've still got them because they're quite impressive on the Greymouth skyline.
They do stand out.
Lots and lots of people take photos of them.
Just an aside, you know, you were saying that originally there were the hydraulic steam cranes before the electric cranes came in, and there was a big fire, I understand, that burnt out the control house for the hydraulic crane. Was that while you
Again,
were there?
no, that was before my time.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us, Bill?
Not really.
No?
I just hope I've been of some use to you.
no, it's fantastic.
Very much so.
Was there any work going on the wharf and the realigning the wharfs while you were there? Or
Oh, there was always repairs,
Yeah.
but that was simply a wear and tear type of thing.
Right, there weren't any major structural extensions or anything
No.
happening while you were there?
Except the big tetrahedrons laid down along the tip, you know, with well, you know what I mean by the tip and down the signal station?
The big triangular things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the tetrahedrons are those big, strange shaped concrete blocks, just to lock everything in the breakwater.
Yes.
Yeah, we did a lot of work on those. When there was no ships in, we were putting them into position.
With the
And-
cranes?
No, train didn't reach down there.
No, they wouldn't get it. Yeah.
And pouring a bit of concrete here and there to lock them all in together.
Right.
But apart from that, no, that's just mainly repair job, wear and tear on the wharf.
And can you talk a little bit about the role of the diving in your job?
The diving in those days, of course, there were no aqualungs. It was standard diving dress. That's if you like, the helmet, like that little one over there. And the canvas twill suit, the boots. Now, okay, you know the size of me. Each one of those boots was 18 pounds. The helmet and corselet combined was 36 pounds. You had 40 pounds of lead on your back and 40 pounds of lead on your chest. This is all great stuff. Once you're down here, you have what you call an outlet valve and control the flow of the air coming in. And the air, by the way, was hand pumps. And nobody liked to diving really deep because they had to pump harder, obviously, to keep the air down to you. You can regulate the flow of air out of your suit so you become semi-buoyant. And in actual fact, you get it right, and a diver carrying all that weight can just be like a ballerina and tiptoe bounce from rock to rock. No problem. But when you come up out of the water and you hit the surface, then you've got to climb a ladder. And you've got the whole lot, suddenly, woof, there you are.
And what were you diving for? What were you doing? Was it
In Greymouth, mainly anything lost over the side. There was very little work. I did more work on grey dredges than I did for the harbour board.
right?
In fact, I only ever once did a real recovery job for the harbour board, and that was one of the front end loaders down at the tip end had gone over the rocks and into the water. The driver was safe, he got out okay. I believe he did something with his arm, might have even broken his arm. But he lived, there was no problem there. And it was simply a case of going down in the standard dress and putting wires onto it and dragging it up.
Okay.
I got called up to Westport because one of the coal boats there had slipped their anchor chain. They put the anchor down in the river and the whole lot went, chain and all. And we drove up there with the gear and the pump to go down in Westport River, and would you believe it had all gone very neatly to a pyramid, and the end link was sitting right at the top. It was simply a case of take the wire in a shackle, screw it in, say, okay, haul away. It was done. About 3 minutes, and it was, my section of it was done.
Was there any communication in those days? Had radio started for you as a diver? Or
Sorry?
You had no radio links in those days as a diver?
Yes, we did.
You did?
Had a radio, yeah.
And did that come in while you were there, or that had been there
No,
for a little
that
while?
was there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
So
It was while I was there that Aqualungs had obviously started, and I said to Mickey Firth, was the engineer, I said, really, you've got to get rid of this stuff and get an Aqualung, because the pump itself was probably about, I'm guessing, but 70 or 80% efficient. And in the Navy, that was one thing we kept right up the top level all the time. The pumps, just as efficient as we could possibly get them, for obvious reasons. And that one at Greymouth was not.
bit inefficient. What was visibility like down there?
Oh, you've seen the Great River and Flood, haven't you?
So you almost be working in the dark.
Divers don't worry about eyes, they've got 10 eyes,
Right.
called fingers.
Okay. Yeah. And was the flow, I mean, how did you deal with the flow? Because
Believe it or not, the maximum recommended current that a diver can work at efficiently is 2.5 knots. With the advent of Aqualungs, with the leaded boots, walking around the bottom, it's not really a problem. But with an Aqualung, the moment you let go of anything, the slightest tide will take you away. And it'll say 2.5 knots is the most a diver can efficiently work in.
so what would the flow in the Grey River be?
Anything up to 10, 12 knots in the flood. Average out, I guess, well, it's slack water, there's no tide. And
Right.
for about half an hour either side,
You're fine.
there's nothing to worry about, no.
Yeah. Did you ever do any maintenance on the wharf?
Maintenance.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
as a diver?
Not as a diver,
Right.
but the Gordon Ellery was the guy there that maintained the wharf, and when the cranes were not in use, like we had no ships come in, and they're up to date, the crane operators all worked with him on wharf repairs.
Okay.
So we were kept fairly well employed as such.
Right. And just going back to the diving, you said that you helped ask the Hull Board to get the Aqualungs in. Did they appear while you were still working there?
Yeah, I ended up using an Aqualung.
And so it would have been about 1960 or so then that would have happened, will it?
Yeah, round about there sometime.
Yeah. Okay.
We have a small gift for Bill.
We do. So we can see the thing a bit better.
Imported from Carlisle, 1952. Ooh, it's a different colour to when I knew it.
There's a bit of artistic
Look at that
license
now.
there, I think.
So that's a painting done by one of our members,
Isn't that gorgeous?
Gary Hopkinson, who's a fairly well-known architect in New Zealand.
Yes.
And since he's retired, watercolours are a hobby,
Yeah.
and we'd like to present you with that, Bill,
Well, thank you
As a
very
nice
much indeed.
Well, we
memory.
won't put that in the garage with all your other things, dear. We'll have a place of honour.